You're working at the bar at 57. What made you think I need to change or I need to do more?
The shock came at 55. Between the two pensions that came, I had about £3,500. £3,500. I've been here for 55 years and I've amassed £3,500. And if that wasn't shock enough, it took me another 2 years to give myself a kick up the backside when 57 came. And then I realised with a thud that I was going to retire in 10 years' time. And I had 10 years to do something about it. I should have done more, should have become more by the age 57 than I was.
You also mentioned to me that you took on a second job.
I didn't have that luxury of time. I had 10 years to do it. So I was doing 80 hours a week and I did that for nearly 3 years. I'd achieved what is known to some people as financial independence light, where your unearned income was equivalent to that of your bills. So I'd done that in 3 years. If you want to be wealthy and you're not wealthy right now, you're going to have to be a very different person. The cost of that new life is your old life.
You're not defined by where you come from.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big message that I always want to tell people.
Like you have to be able to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
When you grow up in ends, you don't realise it when you're confident, but you have an audacity to do things that ordinarily most people wouldn't be willing to do.
Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Atto. We have a special guest in the building. We have Perry, who's a cab driver, property entrepreneur, author, and went on a journey of financial independence at the age of 57. And he achieved financial independence light in 3 years. Perry, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, Ado. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much. You've
Good.
come from a long way. You've come, for those that don't know, Perry's come all the way from Newcastle.
Yeah.
So you had quite a long drive. How was the drive down into London?
Oh, fantastic, strangely enough. Until I hit London, of course, and then you hit the traffic, and then you hit the lights, and then you hit the cameras, and then you hit the driving, the people who drive a little different to they do on motorways around London, and then you've got the cyclists. So it's all a bit strange to me, but we got here in time. That's the important thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I really, really appreciate it because you've driven from quite a while. And I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation because you've had a very interesting journey. And I think it's going to be very inspiring for people who think that they're not able to achieve things at, different ages, right? So, I mentioned just a small part of you. Who would you say Perry is?
I'm nobody special. I'm just a cab driver, as you rightly say. And when I say I'm nobody special, I've got no skills, I've got no qualifications. And I think that's important because so many people think you need lots of qualifications and life experience to become wealthy. And that's not me. And so what I'm hoping is that if people can watch what I did at my age, I started when I was 57, I'm 63 now. And like me, perhaps they have no qualifications, they didn't do well at school. Then they could take on board that they too can achieve what I've achieved in the time allotted, and that age doesn't matter. Age is just a number, and you can become wealthy. I believe anybody can become wealthy, regardless of what age you are, provided you're able to work.
I agree, and I also believe the same thing. I think that it's possible for a large majority of people. Of course, there's some situations where it's a bit more difficult for people, but I believe that also that is a lot to do with the mindset and wanting to be different. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that's very, important, right? So, looking back at your early years, what experiences had the biggest impact on the person you are today?
I don't think it's been one impact. I think if I had a bit of an epiphany at age 57. Well, I was working behind a bar minimum wage, and I had no money in the bank. I had £10,000 of the credit card debt, and I realised that I only had 10 years to retire. And up to that point, I was waiting for the universe to recognise my genius and just give me £1 million. And when I got to 57, I realised that plan wasn't working. And I need to do something different. And that I need to be somebody different. Because the person you are at any given stage in life is a good enough person to get you where you are. And if you want to go a bit further than that, you're going to have to be a different person. But you have to acquire some more skills and some different belief systems than you have right now. So there's no one thing that changed. But it's important to keep learning, keep moving forward. And every time you do that, you learn a new skill, you do something for the first time, you change your belief system, because prior to doing it or achieving it, you might not have believed it possible. And therefore, what you believe affects the way you behave. And once you've done it, then you'll change that belief and you behave, you become a different person, you grow. And I think growing is important to keep moving forward. If you're not moving forward, the world moves faster than you and leaves you behind. And that's why so many young people see the elderly as being irrelevant, because they get to the point, some elderly people, my mother is one of them, where, you hear them say, I don't want to use a mobile phone, I don't need to know about computers. But the problem with that is if you're not growing, then the world leaves you behind and you become irrelevant to the world.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to keep on learning, to keep on advancing, to keep on achieving bigger things than you are, and that's the way you'll grow. So there's been no one thing, but throughout my journey, I've had to do different things that have scared me. I'm constantly scared throughout the journey because I'm doing new things all the time. But I'm a very different person now than I was when I first started my journey, and I'm not at the end of my journey yet. So I will be a very different person at the end of my journey, and I'm looking forward to meeting the guy I'll be then, because I've got to learn a lot more stuff than I have already.
Yeah. Let's stay on the topic of, you saying that, you were working at the bar at 57, right? And you mentioned 10K there. What was that like for you at that time, in that period? And what kind of made you think, you know what, I need to change, or I need to do more?
The shock came at 55 when I got a letter from a pension company. When you're doing different jobs throughout your life, you'll stay at a company for a couple of years and you have to be a member of the scheme. And so I had a couple of those letters arrived on my doorstep at age 55. And between the two pensions that came, I had about £3,500. And I thought, 55 at the time, £3,500. I've been here for 55 years and I've amassed £3,500. And if that wasn't shock enough, it took me another 2 years to give myself a kick up the backside when 57 came. And then I realized with a thud that I was going to retire in 10 years' time. And I had 10 years to do something about it. And I'd waited for, as I say, the world to help me become a millionaire or become successful. And at age 57, I wasn't that person. And that was, I wouldn't say it was a shock, because I know it. I knew I wasn't stupid. I knew I was quite bright. And so it came as a shock to realize that I wasn't bright enough to realize that I should have done more, should have become more by the age 55 or 57 than I was. And that was tough to take, that I'd let myself down. If I go back to when I was 21-year-old, I always imagined I'd be a bit further ahead at 55 and 57 than I was. And that was the shock. That was the disappointment in myself that I'd come this far. And not just me, of course, because I have an impact on other people's lives, my wife, my two daughters. And I'd let them down as well. And so that was the tough bit to take. But it took the shock of knowing I had 10 years to actually do something about it. And many people don't. Many people are like me. They just go through life and take life as it comes. But by using that philosophy, I got to minimum wage, working behind a bar, £10,000 of a credit card debt. And it's not a good plan, Adam. It's not a good plan.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting. I do understand what you're saying in terms of you feel disappointed in yourself. And it's interesting because I guess you can feel like that at times. And there's this worry of, I want to retire. Am I going to have to work until, I die, which is not what anybody wants. But I'm sure that you've definitely given value in so many other ways. Like you say, you've got a wife and kids, and I'm sure that you've given them value in so many other ways too. I wanted to know, right? So when we spoke, you also mentioned to me that you took on a second job, right? At that point. So was that at that point, okay, you're like, okay, cool, I need to, take on a second job. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, sure. So I was working at a pub 5:30 till midnight, about 40 hours a week. So it's a full-time job. But it was just covering the bills. And I knew my original goal to become wealthy, because wealth is different. Wealth isn't a number, because everybody's got a different number. So wealth to me was a feeling. And I thought, what would I have to do in order to feel wealthy? And it's difficult. If you ask yourself that question, it'll take you a long time to come to it. And I come up with the idea that if I was sat on a yacht that I owned in some Mediterranean lagoon, sipping Mai Tais with my wife as the sun went down, and I had sufficient cash in the bank to fund that lifestyle, I would feel wealthy.
Okay.
So that was my original goal. It's changed a lot since then, but that was my original goal. So I reckon I could get a yacht. So I did some research, get a yacht for £100,000, and I reckon about £200,000 that was kicking out 8% a year. I could fund that lifestyle. So my target was £300,000. Now, clearly, evidently, I wasn't going to do that work on a minimum wage behind a bar. But I had no skills and qualifications, so there were other options, albeit continuing on minimum wage. And that because I was starting work at 5:30, they gave me the day to do something else. So I thought about some of the options that were available to me and decided that perhaps a cab driver I should do. And I'd seen lots of cab drivers and I knew they were making good money, but I never wanted to do it because I was arrogant enough to consider cab driving as, I don't know, the last refuge of a desperate man, if you wish. But I was desperate. And so I decided to swallow my pride and become a cab driver, which is a ridiculous thing to say. I know that now. As I said, I've changed, but it was an attitude I had back then. So what I started doing was I spoke to a number of cab companies, and I chose one, and I started working from 7 o'clock in the morning till about 4 in the afternoon, 4:30 in the afternoon. And then I went home, changed my uniform, grabbed something to eat, had a shower, and went to the pub, which fortunately was just across the road from me, so there's little travelling time. So in that hour off, I did those things, and then went to work from 5:30 till midnight. So, and I did that for about 3 months, working 2 full-time jobs every day. And it nearly killed me. Nearly killed me, I don't mind telling you. So what I decided to do was I gave up the bar job, but still worked 80 hours a week as a cab driver. So I was working from about 5 in the morning till 5 at night, 5 days a week, and then I'd work Saturdays till 5 and then till 2 in the afternoon on a Sunday. So I was doing 80 hours a week, and I did that for about 2.5, nearly 3 years, taking only Christmas Day and Boxing Day off. But what it allowed me to do was I've now got 2 wages, the equivalent of 2 wages, albeit I'm only working on minimum wage. I was working 80 hours, so it's 2 wages. So it allowed me to continue to pay the bills, contribute to the bills in the family, but it also gave me one salary which I could save. So I was saving about £1,000 a month. And that's one of the key components of becoming wealthy is you're going to have to work more. There are lots of YouTubers and books that will tell you that it's dead easy to make extra money, and there's going to be no stress. You can just get your laptop out and fill a few surveys in.
That's not true.
That's not true. Sometime along the road, you're going to have to work very hard. And of course, that's one of the things that why people don't become wealthy, because they think they're working hard, but if you ask them to double their hours, they'll say, I can't double the hours, or I'm not willing to double the hours. But I had to do it because I was desperate. And so I did that for 3 years until I'd saved up enough money for my first deposit on a property. So that took me just over 2 years to do that.
Wow. And this is, you know what, like, this is just like a story of like perseverance and hard work. And the fact that you were willing to do like 8 hours. 8 hours is a lot of hours. Oh my God, over like 2 years
To be fair though, it's not hard work being a cab driver.
Okay.
As you know, it's not like working on a coal face. In fact, when people ask me what do I do for a living, I just say I sit on my backside and talk to people.
Okay,
and that's effectively all it is. It's not, it's stress-free as well. So yes, it's long hours, but they're easy hours to do, in my opinion.
Okay, fair. I get it. So you feel like because it's not so strenuous on you, right?
It's not hard labor.
You feel like you can do more because of that. Okay, that makes sense from that point of view. And so, and why did you decide property out of all things that, you know what, I'm going to save money and then actually I'm going to go down to get into property?
I didn't. You speak to any financial advisor and they'll tell you if you're going to go through the pension route or perhaps the stocks and shares ISA, it's going to take time. You need to be in the market for maybe 30, 40 years, which is what your pension's for. I didn't have that luxury of time. I had 10 years to do it. So I went for the option that gave me the bigger bang for my buck, which was in property. As we all know, you have rental income from property, but more importantly from property, you get capital growth. And it was the capital growth over the 10-year period, the goal, 10 years I set myself to achieve my goal of $1 million, making $1 million. it's that capital growth that will eventually deliver the £1 million.
Okay.
So that's why I chose to go into property.
Okay, cool. And we'll talk a little bit about like how, in terms of your plans there and how that's going to work for you and how you kind of plan to use that in the future. Because I think it's very interesting for people to know the start and beginning. Because some people don't, they know that they want to make more, but they don't know why. So they don't know the goal. And not only do they not know the goal, when they do know the goal, they don't even know how that goal impacts the end. So when we talk, we'll speak about it because you have a clear understanding of why you're doing what you're doing, and when you get there, how exactly you're going to do that, which is, I think, is the missing piece for some people sometimes. Because like you say, the numbers can be different. For some people, 300,000 might be enough. Maybe. A lot of people say they would want millions, but my point still stands. It's different for a lot of different people, right? Here's a hard truth. Being a business owner means constantly fighting against the unpredictable. You can send invoices on time, manage your budget like a pro, and still face cash flow problems when a client drags their feet or an unexpected expense hits. But here's the thing. Smart business owners don't just react to problems, they plan for them. That's why I use Tide's Instant Saver account. While you're chasing down that late payment, the rest of your business funds don't have to sit idle. With up to 4.22% AER Variable, no withdrawal fees, instant access, and FSCS protection up to £85,000, every pound keeps working, and you can open an account with just £1. Right now, Tide is offering a £100 bonus to new members from my community who open and fund a Tide Instant Saver with £5,000 in the first 30 days. Just use the code SavvyWallet. Plus, for the first 6 months, you can earn up to 4.22% AER Variable on your business savings. Opening an account takes just 3 steps. Tap the link in the episode description, enter the code SavvyWallet, and start making your money work harder for you. New Tide members receive up to 4.22% AER Variable. Interest rates are tiered with the top rate for balances over £1 million. New Tide members get these rates free for 6 months. After that, your Tide plans rates apply. For the full offer T's and C's, visit tide.co/savings. Rate correct as of the 8th of May, 2025. So you mentioned that you saved for about 2 years, was it?
Nearly 3 years. Yeah, it took me about 2.5 years. Well, no, just over 2 years to save the first deposit, which was well, actually, it wasn't just the deposit; it was all the acquisition costs wrapped up into about £20,000.
Okay, so about 20,000. And just so we're clear, people, we can mention. So can you take us through the numbers of the first property?
Sure.
What location it was, how much it kind of cost, etc., and stuff like that.
My first property was in a place called Norton. I can't buy where I live in Newcastle. It's too expensive in Newcastle, would you believe? So I buy about 40 miles further south on Teesside. So the first property I bought was in Norton, which is in Stockton. It was a 2-bed semi, a lovely 2-bed semi, gardens to front and rear. Get this, for £63,000. If you're watching this in London, in the southeast, read and weep. And you can still get them, by the way. So £63,000. I got it for £20,000. The mortgage at this time, so this is before COVID, the mortgage at this time was £87. The rent was £550. £50 went on management fees because I don't manage the properties myself. I don't have time. I see my job as an investor as just to create the income, create the money to invest, then somebody else can manage the investment for me. So it was £550. Mortgage was £87. Management fees £50. So I was coming out with a neck end of £400 a month extra towards my plan. So I was saving £1,000 a month from cabbing, and so there's an extra £400. Unlike, I suppose, a lot of people, I didn't blow the £400. I just added it to what I was saving. Now, when you do that, that impacts the saving because it takes less time to save for the next one because you've got an extra £400.
Exactly.
But that didn't happen for me. Something quite strange happened. Unexpected, rather, not strange. A friend of mine owns a company who puts in kitchens into restaurants and bars. And he says, Perry, I might need an extra hand during the week sometime. Got a call on you to come and give us a hand, put this kitchen in. And I said, I can't, mate. I'm seeing a solicitor on that day. And he says, I seen a solicitor. Are you in trouble? And I says, no. I says, I'm just buying a house. He says, I didn't know you were moving. I says, I'm not moving. I'm just buying another house. He says, are you going to rent it out? I says, yeah. He says, you know what? I should have done that years ago. I'll tell you what. Why don't you and I buy a house together? And then we can, it doesn't take so much money to put in. I said, well, I'd love to do that. I haven't got a problem. He's my best friend anyway, knew him for many, many years. I says, but I've just bought a property and I'm skint. All my money's just got in the property. Yeah. He says, not a problem. I've got some money. So what we'll do is I put my money into this property now, and then you save up money and you buy your third property with your money. We'll own those two together. I says, okay. So we did that. So 6 months later, after buying the first one, I had two properties, all but, well, 1.5, let's say.
Yeah.
But it was another £200 to go towards my savings. So now saving £1,000 from Cavan, £400 from the first house, £200 from the second house, which reduced the time it saved to buy the next property. Coincidentally, that second property was £63,000. That was in a place in Durham called Shildon, and it was a lovely three-bedroom terraced house, yard to rear, garden to the front. A year later, I bought a third property, and this property was £67,000 in Stockton again, and that was a 3-bed terrace. That was again £500. He was paying cash. This guy pays weekly. He'd been there for 7 years. He wants to stay there until he dies, and so I took the attitude that he was a great tenant. Still is a great tenant, never wants anything done to the property, never complains, he just rocks up every week and pays his money. So it was less rent I was getting, but it was a good tenant, and they are worth the weight in gold. So after 3 years, I had £400 from one property, £400 from another, and £200 from the one I got with my friend. Now, my bills were only £1,000 a month, so after 3 years, there was £1,000 extra money coming. So I'd achieved what is known to some people as financial independence light, where your unearned income is equivalent to that of your bill. So, so I'd done that in 3 years, and then COVID happened. Then the Russians invaded Ukraine. Then there were 14 interest rate rises, so consecutive interest rate rises, and I couldn't have chosen a worse time to do it. So the buy-to-let scenario didn't work as well, because my profit on the properties went down from £400 a month with the interest rate rises down to about £220. Fortunately, I'd hit 60 by then, and I took receipt of a small forces pension. I did 12 years in the forces, so that was an extra £400. So it still kept it around about £1,000 of extra savings a month. But the buy-let market wasn't as efficient. And so what I decided to do was to buy a fourth property, but this time this property would be serviced accommodation. Yeah. Now, for those of you who are watching this and don't know, serviced accommodation, think Airbnb. You get more money, but there's lots of extra costs involved as well. And so I bought my fourth property in the fifth year, and it was £105,000, 3-bedroom terrace in Hartlepool, and it was a serviced accommodation. It didn't work. It didn't work as efficient as I was told it would be. It didn't work the way I wanted it, as much that it was costing me money. I had to put lots of money into it every month rather than take money out of it. So just for your viewers here, when we think about serviced accommodation, there's lots of costs. If you're getting somebody else to manage it for you, they'll charge you 20% of the take. If you're putting it on Airbnb or Booking.com, they'll take 20%. So there's 40% of it gone. You could probably have a mortgage, or most certainly have a mortgage. Mortgages, is probably take 30% of it. So now there's 70% of it gone already. Then if you get tenants in or visitors who stay in, not for 3 months at a time like contractors would, but if they're 3 different people moving in a week, so one on a Monday, one on a Wednesday, and one on the Friday stays for the weekend, you've got to get it cleaned 3 times. The cleaners will charge you £40 a pop. So there's 120 quid in 1 week. So you might be making £2,000 a month in income, but the costs are massive. And I got the stage where I was it was costing me money. So I didn't. Some people say I didn't give it long enough. I gave it a year. Almost on the anniversary, I sold it, and I took the money out. Sold it for £5,000 more, and then I bought it for.
How much was that one?
105. So I sold it for 110.
Okay, cool.
But
what year did you buy this one? 105.
This was in Hartlepool.
Okay. What year was it?
So it'll have been the 5th year. So it'll have been 62. So I sold it last year.
Okay, last year. Okay, so 2024. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I took the money out of that and had £30,000 and I put that in the bank. And so now I'm back to 3, but something unusual happened. I heard that some people, I went to a property meeting. Somebody said, one of the presenters said that he doesn't put any of his own money when he buys a property. And I thought, you don't put any money in house. How do you do that? So I went to see and had a chat with him afterwards. And I says, just run me through how that works. He says, always I just ask people to lend me money and they lend me money. People know I've been doing this for a long time. He was a developer. I say, so I get lots of people say, if you give me 10% of my money, I'll lend you the money to buy the properties. So I thought that was interesting. So I went to my YouTube channel and I said, look, this is what I'm planning to do. I want to buy a portfolio of more properties, and I don't want to put any more my own money in. So is anybody willing to lend me money? I'll give you 10% a year. And a couple of people got in contact with me. One says, yeah, I've got 60,000-70,000 pounds you can have. I said, thanks very much.
Wow.
Another one, a lady said, she says, yeah, I'm happy to work with you on this. I've been following your progress for some years now. And I says, she said, how much you want? And I said, how much you got? She says, the most I've ever raised is £3 million. I says, £3 million? I says, right, we need to chat about this. So I then, my job changed, if you wish, from generating income to invest in properties to finding properties that would suit other investors, people who are going to lend me the money to do this.
Yeah.
And so I was on a Facebook page. There are loads of Facebook pages for property investors. And somebody said that was selling this portfolio. And I said, okay, it was looking interesting. Send me the details. And they sent me the details. And I did my own research, drove around. It was local to me, thankfully. Drove around all the properties, checked the valuations that they'd said. Excuse me. And I agreed. I agreed with the valuations because a lot of people will say things of worth stuff and it's not worth that.
Yeah.
But I checked and I think they undervalued a little bit. I think it's probably worth a little more. So I said, this is very interesting. And I went to my friend who had the money. I said, look at this. And I'll give you the figures. There's 10 properties. They were valued, I think, at about 680. I've just sent the valuers out there, paid £3,500 to get them valued. I think they're valued about 680. And they are owned by a charity, somebody who's left them in a will, and the charity don't want them. They just want some cash for them. And the charity agreed to sell them for £410,000.
Wow. So
there's £270,000, you would think. Mm-hmm. But of course, there are some lot of fees involved in that. There are £35,000 finder's fees, £20,000 stamp duty. The legals are going to be close to £10,000. Valuation I've said is £3,500. I'm going to buy them on a bridge as it happens. I'm not using lenders' money. Buy them on a bridge. The bridge charge 1.1% a month, so that's £5,500 a month interest. So there's about £100,000 of the costs in there, which I don't pay till completion. So the lender will just lend us the money. We'll complete in 6 months' time. I'll refinance all 10 of them out on buy-to-let mortgages as opposed to the bridge. Pay the bridge 30 grand, bridge lender 30 grand plus the original back. And I should end up with about £680,000 of the property with about a £520,000 mortgage and net income after maintenance and management costs of about £1,400 a month.
Okay.
Which sounds okay, but I've had to borrow £520,000 to get it. And if you think about it, if interest rates go up 1%, it adds a lot to the borrowing. It adds another 50 grand to the borrowing, to the repayment. Yeah. But I should have about £160,000 of equity. So worst comes to worst, you sell it all, pay the debt off, and put some money in the bank, less tax. Okay, interesting. You haven't completed on this deal yet, but this is something that's happening. So this will take it up with the legals right now. So it'll take the property for my own portfolio up to if I include the one I live in, 14 properties, all done a minimum wage. Yeah, at age 63. In 3 years, which is amazing. Yeah. So just we clarify just a few things for people. There's 3 questions I want to ask you. Yeah. So when you first started to buy your property, so this was prior to
COVID, right? So 2019, right?
Yes.
So okay, so started in
COVID was 2020,
2019.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, COVID was 2020. So okay, so you bought, because I just want to give people the numbers, because they're probably thinking property for 60 grand. Where can we buy this, right? So this was 2019 when you bought your very first property with the money that you saved from 8 hours of cabin. Cool, understand that. And then you also mentioned after you had got your, I think it was your third property. Yeah, after you had your third property, you were, in terms of profit, you got £1,000, was it?
No, in total.
Yeah.
So there'll be
in
£400 from each
yeah.
property, and then £200 a shed. Little story, by the way. I said I'd buy the third one with my friend.
Yeah.
My friend couldn't prove income to the lenders.
Okay.
So I bought the third one by myself.
Okay.
We've since then taken his name off the middle one. Although we have an agreement, I still owe him £10,000 because he was going to pick up some bad credit. Which is the downside to going in partnership with somebody.
Yeah, okay.
Because if they get bad credit, by association, you get the bad credit as well.
Yeah.
So we quickly went to a solicitor and got his name taken off the deed. So effectively, on paper, I own them all right now.
Okay, so you own all three. The first one nets you 400. The second one
200 because I was splitting it with my friend.
Okay.
And the last one 400. So there's £1,000.
About £1,000, and then it dropped from £1,000 to what?
To about
When COVID
600,
happened?
just over
Okay.
600.
Wow. Okay, so you lost 40%.
Yeah.
Wow. That's tough to 40% drop in profit.
And then,
There's a lot. Yeah.
to be entirely honest,
Yeah.
it no longer was financial independence light
Yeah.
because of the interest rate rises.
Yeah.
But as I said, fortunately, I had £400 coming from a Navy pension. So you could argue, or I would argue, that I put that investment in when I was 16 to 20 to 28 when I left the Navy.
Yeah.
So I was claiming that. But it's a tough time in buy-let now. And the reason landlords got skinned on the interest rate rises is because when interest rates were low at about 2%, they were buying two big houses on two big mortgages, and whilst the rents might have been just been covering the mortgage, when interest rates doubled from 2% to 5.5%, that no longer made sense, and they just chucked the keys back or sold them, and that's why they see lots and lots of landlords chucking their properties back because they bought in the wrong place and bought too much house.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? When you do buy too much house, but it's also the reality. And I'm glad that you shared the fact that you said that it dropped because of circumstances. I think for people, they need to also understand this could happen, right?
Absolutely.
And it can happen in any environment, right? I had a conversation recently where we were talking about pensions, and some people are having their pensions still invested, and because of that, is also, prone to the fluctuations that could also happen, right? Your pensions could also be dropping down, which, let's say there's still an element of risk all the time with this kind of stuff, right? So I think it's important for people to understand, even when you get there, you have to still be good at managing. You just don't get there and you're like, okay, like I'm like a free splash and everything.
I think well, you're dead right. I think when you get there, and you often hear people say, you wouldn't think he's a millionaire, he's dead tight, wouldn't spend his money. And I think what happens is, once you've gone through the journey, if you wish, and you've put all the effort in, you then want to protect what you've built up so much that you're frightened to spend it in many cases, that having worked so hard to gain it, you're now worried about losing the whole thing. And you therefore don't spend it as flagrantly as you would imagine that millionaires should be spending the money and chucking the money around. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You'll find that people who aren't millionaires that are buying flashy cars and going on big holidays and wearing branded clothes. The true millionaires who know how hard it is to get that £1 million don't want to lose it, and they protect it. And someone once said to me, he says, and it'll come to me sometime, because I think I'm probably going to buy another 25 to 50 houses in the next 2 years, perhaps, depending on interest rates. And as you say, risk, and because all balls are in motion all the time. But someone once said to me, he says, don't risk losing what you have for something you don't need. So maybe I should go for another 25 houses and not the 50, because I don't need 50. 25 will get me to where I want, another 25 will get me where I want to be. And I don't want to risk what I've achieved thus far for something I don't need. Yeah.
So the other question I had actually for you was the buy-to-let strategy. How comes you decided you settled on the buy to let? I know you mentioned service accommodation, but yeah, on that strategy.
I think, Ado, just because out of ignorance, it's the easiest strategy. It's plain vanilla. You buy hopefully cheaper than it's worth, and then you put someone in to pay the rent, and that's it. It doesn't get any more difficult than that. And there are other ways in doing it. One of the things I'm likely to do is that I will do buy, refurbish, refinance, or resell it, and that's because I foresee that I'm not a big spender anyway. So when I buy this 10 portfolio, my income from properties will be round about £1,800, £2,000 a month, and I won't spend that money. It'll just stay in the bank account, but it will start building up, especially when I add other bits of portfolio to it. And you don't want cash in the bank, because cash in the bank is getting chewed by inflation. So you're actually losing money when you've got money in the bank.
Yeah.
So what I'm likely to do is take some of that and use it for a different strategy, which is to buy a property for cash at a discounted level, add something to the value by refurbing it, and then selling it. And I might do a couple of those. And that's just a way to keep the money moving around.
Okay, so you got to look into flipping potentially.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the next thing. And then the serviced accommodation. And then there's HMOs, which I wouldn't touch.
Okay.
I just wouldn't do HMOs. But, some people like it. It's some people's bag. It's not mine. But I think, imagine if you're coming into property for the first time, you want to do the easiest thing first.
Yeah.
Dip your toe in the water, see how it works. Don't throw yourself into a 10-bedroom HMO with all the problems that come from it, because you might do something crazy. It wasn't for me. So I did the easiest thing, and I got a bit braver to do so, which took me to the serviced accommodation, which then took me to buying a portfolio, which will then take me to flipping properties. But there's a progression here.
Yeah.
Just learn and become braver as you go, because I said I'm scared all the time.
I understand. So I guess for you, when you're choosing property, then for the buy to let, what are like some of the key factors that you were looking at before you
the smallest mortgage I can possibly get, and that's what will protect you against interest rate rises. Interest rates have fallen, or have fallen recently, but I can see inflation creeping back in, and therefore they might have to raise interest rates again. So to protect yourself against that, you want to get a smaller mortgage as possible, and that means buying in an area where the properties are the cheapest. Not getting the cheapest properties, because often there's a reason the properties are cheap, but if you know the area you're working in, or if you don't, you need somebody who you can trust to find the properties for you. Find inexpensive properties. Just to give you an idea, that first property I bought for £63,000, I refinanced recently for 90, so that went up £27,000. Wow. Although I did get it, I think, about £10,000 cheaper. So let's say 17,000 of its growth. So you can still get the growth, even though the inexpensive properties. I think I would buy in properties for around the £80,000 mark. To buy a 3-bed terraced or a nice 2-bed semi for £80,000, you're going to need.
That sounds so wild.
It's crazy down here, isn't it? Absolutely.
80, we wish.
Yeah,
we wish.
I mean, the housing market's broken in London, the southeast. Everywhere else it works pretty well, but I think you'll need about £30,000. So there's your target. You need £30,000 to get a nice £80,000 house, which you rent for probably about £600, £650.
Okay.
And your mortgage is probably going to be £250, £300. So it's still good rent. Okay. But the real kicker comes in the capital growth of the properties. That's what will make you wealthy.
Yeah.
You won't make fortunes on the rent. Don't think you're going to do that. If it covers all its bills and covers any potential interest rate rises, and that's factored into it, it's the capital growth that will
make the capital growth that you're looking at to capitalize on, to make more money. And we're going to talk about that and how you're going to plan to do that, because I think it's quite interesting. I think for a lot of people, they don't focus on the capital growth part and actually thinking about reselling. A lot of people do want to hold properties. We all have our different reasons, generational wealth and stuff like that. In terms of like some of the challenges, so you did mention some challenges from the perspective of, service accommodation, but were there some other challenges that you face whilst you're scaling your portfolio, even on the buy-to-let side as well?
The challenges are that you're going to have to be, if you want to be wealthy and you're not wealthy right now, you're going to have to be a very different person. And that is going to be hard, because you're going to have to change your belief system. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. You're going to have to do a lot of hard work. and it's going to take time. I had a guy come up to me in a bar who recognized me from a YouTube channel. It doesn't happen very often, but it's kind of nice when it does. And he says, "Oh, you're that YouTube kid, aren't you?" I says, "Yeah." He says, "Can you make me wealthy?" And I said, "Well, it depends, I guess." And he says, "Well, it depends on what?" I says, "Well, it depends how bad you want it." He says, "Oh, whoa, I want it pretty bad." I says, "Okay, then I'll tell you what to do." I says, "You work 4 hours extra a day. That'll give you a 50% rise in income. You take that income and you invest it at 8%. And you do that for 10 years in property, and you're almost likely enough be minted in 10 years' time." And he says, "Oh," he says, "and that's it, is it?" I says, "Yeah, that's pretty much it." He says, "There's no easier way of doing it." I says, "No, I think that's what it is." And he says, "Oh, no. And that's what it is. People expect an easy way to do this. There's not. You're going to have to make some sacrifice." So I had to change a lot. I had to recognize that I'd been an idiot for 57 years. I had to work harder, twice as hard than I was doing. I had to sacrifice going on holiday. I've not had a holiday in the time I've done this. I put all my money towards reinvesting it. But not just me. My family have had to adapt to me working all the time. So they've lost because we haven't been on holiday. I refuse to go on holiday.
Wow.
I tell them, this is a story. Where was it? Yes, I bought 3 houses I bought the 3 houses by the stage. And I'd done no maintenance on my property because for 20 odd years, because I didn't have the money. I was on minimum wage. And latterly, because I don't want to spend money on the property because I'm spending money on other people's properties, or my properties, but other people living in them. And we needed a roof change, and the roof it was okay, but it was probably about time the roof was changed. And I went in one day from work, and my daughter, who was living with us at the time, she's moved out, got her own house now, and my wife were there, and they said, "My mum and I have had a chat, Dad, and we need the roof replacing." I says, "Oh yeah." And they said, "Yeah, so we've got a couple of quotes, and we've got 5,000. We need £5,000. I said, "All right, yeah, great." And I could see by the way they're looking at me that I was expected to pay this. Because from their perspective, they just see me working 80 hours a week, making loads of money, and then owning 3 properties. "You need to replace it." And I says, "I'm not replacing the roof." "Well, why not? Mum works," my wife's a nurse, "Mum works all the time, and you need to go and replace it." I said, "I'm not replacing it." And I stormed out, and there might be some alcohol. I was a bit short-tempered. There might be some alcohol involved, and I stormed out the room. But what I realized was that I hadn't told them, I hadn't brought them on board with my journey. I hadn't explained what I was doing. I hadn't explained what the goal was and how far I'd come from, where I was right now, and where we were going. So the next day, I had a flip chart upstairs. And I brought it down, turned the telly off, and my daughter says, "Oh, what you doing now?" So I says, "Right here." Sat my wife down, and I gave them a presentation. Then I says, "Look, do you remember when I was working across the road at that bar on minimum wage?" "Yeah." I says, "Well, now I earn twice as much money as that. And I bought 3 houses. I said, this house is worth this. It's got this much equity, and this house is worth this. And the income from this one is this, and the income from this one's it, and the income from this one's this. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to take that, and I'm going to buy a 4th property here. And I think by the time I get to here, I'll probably have 12 properties. Those properties at that time will be worth this much money. The income will be this here. But it's going to require me to work 80 hours a week for the next 6 years. You don't have to do anything. Leave it all to me." And there was silence.
Okay.
And I said to my wife, who had promised a holiday, I says, "And that's why I haven't taken you on holiday." And she was quiet, and she looked and she says, "Forget about the holiday. You just keep on doing that."
Okay.
But I had to change everything. But to answer your question, I had that. It was a tough time because that was one of the tough times. I didn't drag I dragged my family with me instead of explaining right from the very beginning. This is what I'm going to try to achieve, and this is what it's going to take for me. So I've very much become a different person. And if you wish, there's a cost to everything, Atto. Everything comes at a price. And if you want a different life, if you want a better life, then the cost of that new life is your old life, because pretty much everything's got to change. If you're not wealthy, then it's because of what you're doing and what you believe in. And pretty much everything has to change. And that's the cost. And that's the tough bit as well.
Yeah. Wow. That story is so interesting for so many reasons. One, the fact that, like you say, you had an idea in your mind, you were focused on your journey, and then sometimes I think when you do that, I think there's this assumption that other people understand
Absolutely
what you're doing.
That was my assumption anyway.
Yeah, right. Like you think
wrong.
it's like, and then you realize, oh, I actually haven't explained what it is.
Yeah.
They're thinking you're rolling in money, you're enjoying it. Oh, what's going on? Why you're not sharing? And then the fact that you did explain it to them and they understood and that they're supporting your journey. That's so beautiful to see, because I think that's what it's about. It's about, it's about trying to bring other people on your journey, but then also the fact that they're also willing to have that delayed gratification so that you can all have a great future, the future that you want in, as well. So I think it's very important. It's a very important message for people to understand that this kind of journey is not alone. You don't really do it alone. You do it with other people and explain it.
You can't do it alone.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I definitely wanted for us to hone in on is, so for you mentioned the fact that it was on minimum wage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And many people are probably thinking that's impossible, right? For you to have gotten to property. I guess for those who, think it's not achievable, what's your message to them?
Well, one of the reasons I said at the start of the YouTube channel, one of them was with discipline, because I thought if people are watching me do it, because I recorded my journey on my YouTube channel, and it's called Stupid is the Norm, by the way. And I thought if I record it, then that will keep me disciplined, to keep me on target, knowing people are watching me. But the other reason I did it was to prove it could be done. Because I kind of I believed in myself that it was possible, providing you did some remarkable things. If you want to achieve something remarkable, you have to do some remarkable things. And evidently, before I reached the age 57, I didn't have the discipline to do what I knew was necessary. I think a lot of people know how to be wealthy. They know they shouldn't be spending money they don't have. They know they shouldn't be racking up debts on credit card or on personal loans. They know they shouldn't be spending the money on branded clothes. They know they shouldn't be going on holidays that they have to put on a credit card. They know they shouldn't be buying cars they don't need. Everybody knows that stuff. But we get so caught up playing the status game that, and peacocking to others to how well we look, that we kind of ignore the fact that if we didn't do any of this stuff, we could take that money and invest it and become wealthy. And the reason they don't is because it's much easier to look wealthy than it is to actually be wealthy. Go out and buy yourself a new set of threads and get a car on lease, and all of a sudden you're an overnight success. Mm-hmm. And that's the easy way to do it. But the hard way is to take that money, so to forego all those purchases and take the money instead and invest it. And it's still achievable if you have the discipline to do that and not play the status game. The status game is what keeps people poor. It's trying to keep up with the Joneses, trying to look wealthy, trying to look successful, caring what people think. That's a big change in me, by the way. I don't care about what people think. Not in the selfish way that I don't care about you. I mean, I no longer judge myself or hold myself accountable to what others think of me. That doesn't bother me anymore. It genuinely doesn't. And that's what keeps most people trapped, is they worry about other people and how they're being judged by other people.
Yeah. Being
judged by people who are average, normal rats caught in the rat race, who you shouldn't care whether they judge you or not. They are nobody. They haven't achieved, what you want to achieve. They don't have your goals, your aspirations, and so you should care less what their thoughts are about you.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think it's very important to just realize, like you say, you do have to be different in some way. You have to be willing to break away from the masses sometimes. For sure, and it's scary to do that, right?
Yeah, because it's dangerous.
Very dangerous, right? Because it could be, you might feel like, oh, you're missing out on stuff when everybody wants to go out, and you're like, you know what, I really want a budget. And you're like, oh, okay, well, you might have the fear of, oh, you might not be invited again, or you might, lose some of those relationships, which I think if you have any of these kind of true friendships, you realize actually it's more than just going out to a fancy place.
Of course.
Like a real friendship is more than that. So it's likely you won't lose those out, but you have the fear, and nothing, can get away from the fact that you'll have fears.
And if you're growing Atto, you will leave some of these friends behind.
True. Yeah.
Not because you don't find them interesting or it's just because you've grown and they will stay where you are. They will
Yeah.
stay where they are, rather. And because you will change, what they'll say is, you've changed. But yes, you might have changed, but more importantly, they've stayed the same. They haven't grown at all. And also you pick up new friends on the way. I now go to 2 or 3 property meetings a month where I've now great friends with some people there who are mentoring, helping me and giving me advice on my own journey that I didn't have before. So you're getting new friends who know more than you, friends who are willing to help you on your journey.
Yeah.
And so, you don't feel bad about leaving your friends behind just because they don't want to move.
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, right? Like it's such an interesting thing because I don't necessarily believe in the whole notion of leaving people behind. I don't think it's like that. I think naturally sometimes friendships can, as like you say, as you change, those friendships, unfortunately, sometimes could start to wither. Not always intentionally. It's not. I don't think it's as intentional as, oh, I'm just going to cut you off because you offer nothing to me. I think that's harsh. But I think it's more naturally maybe what you're interested in and the things that you find value in might change. So that maybe that way, that's how the kind of friendship.
That's
kind of
what I
goes
meant
away.
that too. That's what I meant.
So I kind of said it in that way. Cool. So let's talk about financial independence, right? For people wanting to kind of, go on that journey and achieve it, right? What are the steps they should follow? And what are the key challenges that they might face along the way?
Okay, there's only one difference between the wealthy and the non-wealthy, and that is that the wealthy own stuff. Now, you could say, well, the non-wealthy own stuff as well. And you say, yeah, but the wealthy own a very different set of stuff than the non-wealthy. The wealthy own stuff that grows in value and often kicks out an income as well, whereas the non-wealthy buy stuff that loses value. And so if you've got 2 groups of people, and this one here is buying stuff that grows in value, and this one here buys stuff that decreases in value, then the gap between the two in terms of wealth is going to grow every year. And that's just maths. It's not the fault of the wealthy. Or they've just made different buying decisions. So you need to acquire items if you want to be wealthy. You need to acquire items that grow in value and oftentimes kick out an income. Now, there are only 2 things. There's businesses. You can buy or own a business. You can invest in stocks and shares, and you invest in property. And that's it. There's only 3, which is great because if you give people too many choices, they won't make a decision at all.
True.
So let's make this easier. Let's say you're not a natural entrepreneur, so you don't want to go in business. So that even better because now it gives us 2 choices. One is property and one is stocks and shares. Now, in my book, I ask the question, which way do you want to do this? Do you want to do this the long, easy way or the short, hard way? Because if you want to do it the long, easy way, then you need to do it in stocks and shares. You need to be involved in stocks and shares for 30 or 40 years. Best way to do that is through your pension. If you're going to retire before 55, do it through stocks and shares. But you've got to be in it for some time. And you don't have to be wealthy to do that. If you're working at McDonald's from age 16 to the time you retire, and all you do is you put in 2 hours your weekly wage into your McDonald's pension, it is almost guaranteed you'll be a millionaire by the time you retire. Almost guaranteed. Notwithstanding the changes in stock exchange, which you mentioned before. But because you're in it for 50 odd years, you'll ride out all those ups and downs, and you'll pretty much be a millionaire in by the time you retire. That's the long, easy way. If you want to do it the harder way, then you have to do that in property. But it's capital intensive, which means you're going to have to work a lot harder to generate enough income to invest in property.
Yeah. Interesting.
And that's it. The only difference in the wealthy and the non-wealthy are the spend decisions. At another time I was in a pub. I sound like I'm in a pub all the time, but I'm not. A woman came, we were in a conversation with a bunch of people, and somebody said, oh, Perry's got some property. How many properties you got, Perry? I said, I got 4 at the time. She says, you're the reason my daughter can't buy a property because you're buying all the properties up. And I says, no, that's not true. She says, it is. You don't need more than 4 properties. I says, well, it's my pension. She says, you still don't need more than 4 properties. I says, I don't understand what's the problem here. I says, all it is my my spending decisions? Is that what you're criticising, where I choose to spend my money? Because I said, where did you go on holiday last year? Oh, we had 2 holidays. We went to Spain for a couple of weeks, and then later on in the year, we went to the Gran Canaria for a week. I said, great, I didn't have any. Instead of going on holiday and spend the holiday, I spent it in property. And anybody could have bought those properties. They were up for sale. I just offered the money and they accepted it. So what you're criticising me for is my spending habits. All I'm doing is acquiring an asset that grows in value. You acquired an asset. Well, it wasn't even an asset. It was a holiday. And your money's gone. Where's your money gone? It's gone. It's spent. And now you've got to work hard again at the job you probably hate in order to generate more money to go and blow it again on another holiday. Whereas I've still got the house.
Yeah.
The money I spent on the house is still in the house. It's in there in equity. And the house is growing in value. And it's kicking out an income. So you have a duty. If you want to be wealthy, you have a duty to acquire as many appreciating assets as possible, not just to yourself, but for those who rely upon you for income. And that's what you have to do, acquire assets that grow in value.
So for people, let's see if we make this very practical for people, right? Let's say, again, there's people listening to this on a range of salaries, right? Everybody's target is going to be different.
Yes.
But how much should somebody, if we say the property route, how much should somebody think about saving? 20, 30K? And then in terms of like that first goal, how much, once they've got the property, how much should they be thinking about profit-wise? Should they be looking at?
You're right. It's hard to generalize because everybody's goal is different.
Exactly.
And everybody can save a different amount of money. But I try to break it down as simple as possible. So if you can save £1,000 a month, let's look at a stocks and shares example and a property example. If you can save £1,000 a month, and you've got to generate. If you can't save it right now, you've got to work more to generate the money. So there's that element. But let's say you can get to the point where you can save £1,000 a month, and you would do that over a 10-year period. Every time you saved £30,000, you would buy a house, which would increase your income by £200 a month, profit from the rent, and you just rinse and repeated that. On the first 2-year anniversary of buying the first property, you could refinance the property because the property would go up in value, and you would take an extra £10,000 out and put that towards the next purchase. If you did that, after 10 years, you would have 9 properties.
Okay.
Which would probably worth about 875. So I've actually got a spreadsheet on this. If any of your viewers or listeners want me to send it to them, they can just drop me an email at abnormal@stupidasthenorm.co.uk, and I'll send you the spreadsheet. If you just put on I saw you on the Atto podcast, then I know who you are. So that's property. So that's what you can expect to get in property. If you do that on stocks and shares, save £1,000 a month in your, let's say it's your stocks and shares ISA, an ETF or something, and again, use the same 10 years, and you would get an 8% return on your money, which you probably could. People quote 10% and 12% for average stock market growth. Well, let's be realistic and let's call it 8%. If you can get 8%, then in 10 years' time, if you're putting £1,000 a month in, that portfolio of shares that you would have built up over that time at 8% will kick out £1,000 a month. So if you're saving £1,000 a month now, in 10 years' time, it would kick out in terms of interest or growth dividends, call it what you will, £1,000 a month. Okay. So if you say put £2,000 a month in your stocks and shares ETF, in 10 years' time, it would kick out £2,000 a month and still maintain its value at that stage. So £1,000. So there's your target. So save £1,000 a month. If you put it in property, you'll end up with £875,000, thereabouts, 9 properties. And if you did it in stocks and shares, you would have enough money to kick out £1,000 passive income in 10 years' time.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it gives people an understanding. So what people need to really understand is how much can they be putting in every month, and then figure out at some point, because I know for me, when I'm investing in my stocks and shares ISA, like a lot of what I do, I just, any money that I earn from it, whether it's dividends or anything like that, and the ETFs that I choose are all accumulation. So on the accumulation side, that's done automatically. But the dividend side, if I receive any dividends from any stocks I own, I just put it back in.
That's all I do.
Yeah, just rinse and repeat, right? So I do the same thing. So it's really understanding how much can you put in and just keep on compounding that and then figure out like where your end goal is to that. I wanted to ask you a question actually in terms of like unconventional ways for people to earn money and save. So you figured out unconventional. I would say it's unconventional actually, to be fair, because I wouldn't think a lot of people think, oh, you know what, let me become a cab driver to also make extra income, right? So can we talk about some unconventional ways people can earn more and save more? Because I think saving is just as important, because we might have watchers and listeners here that they say, oh, actually, I can't save an extra 200-300, but they can. They just are not willing to.
Exactly. Yeah.
So can we talk a little bit about a few ways to kind of stimulate like thoughts for people?
Well, first of all, I would say I'm not an expert in this because I just worked harder. It's I have almost an infinite capacity for hard work. I know everybody says they do, but I was working 80 hours a week. So I never went down the route of even saving money, because when you're working, when you're working 80 hours a week, you don't have any opportunity to spend money because you're working all the time. So I almost by default was saving money because there's nothing to spend it on. So that was the good thing. I've got a friend of mine who, and actually, I was stood outside your door, was the studio door, waiting for you to come, and the amount of Uber drivers, Uber Eats, Just Eat, guys on bikes running around, zipping around, delivering food. I've got a friend of mine who does it, and he works, delivers from a chip shop and makes £90 a night. That's including he gets a wage, and then he gets to keep the tips, and he gets a free supper, which will explain his shape. But that's £90. That's £90 a night. Now he does 3 nights a week, so there's £270 a week. Now it's not fortunes, but £270 a week is nearly £15,000 a year. And
that's extra for him.
Yeah, there's extra.
Okay.
Yeah,
wow.
And so he has to occasionally knock on the doors of people, because he works in advertising, I think, advertising, marketing, something like that. And he occasionally knocks on the door of somebody who knows him, and he's delivering pizza.
Okay.
And I told him, he says it's tough, Perry. I said, I'll tell you what I used to do. I had a script, because I've had some quite stellar jobs in the past. I haven't always been a cab driver. And on occasions I'd pick someone up, and they'd be used to seeing me in a suit, and they'd say, right, cheers, mate, come on, we're going. And you, bloody hell, Perry, you're driving a cab? I said, yeah. Well, how long have you been doing this for? I said, a couple of years or so. He says, whoa, wow. And I knew exactly what they were thinking. They're thinking, man, he's come down a bit, isn't he? Yeah, driving a cab now.
Yeah.
So I had a little script, and I used to say to them, I said, driving a cab. I said, yeah. What I've done is I've worked out that if I save £1,000 a month for this, then after 10 years, because this is my original goal, in 10 years, I'll have saved up £300,000. And what the plan is, and we're going to buy a £100,000 yacht, and me and the wife's going to fill it full of rum and victuals and sail it around the Mediterranean with £200,000 in the bank, and that's our retirement. And they went, all right. And then I would drop the killer, and I'd say, and what's your plan, by the way? and naturally, they wouldn't have a plan, because nobody has a plan, do they? Nobody has a plan. You ask the next 10 people you bump into. Yeah. Just I've been reading a lot about goal setting recently. Just tell me, have you got any goals for the next 10 years? Nobody has a goal, let alone a plan to achieve it. And that was the kicker. And then they would say, all right, there's the money. And they'd always feel obliged to give you a tip because you're a friend. They know you. So they give you a tip, and I say, thanks very much. I'll put that towards my yacht.
You know what? This is the thing. I think, what your friend is doing is the right thing for him, even if it's embarrassing or, the feelings of embarrassment, which I think sometimes can be a bit artificial, because yes, okay, although people might be looking down like, oh my God, like you deliver, like, are you joking? And you deliver. Yeah. He's working towards his plan, right?
And you know why it's embarrassing? Because your why isn't big enough. If you have a why, why are you doing this? People say, well, I want to be wealthy. Why? Well, I do. Well, everybody wants to be wealthy. I said, yeah, but why? Why do you want to be wealthy? What are you going to do with it? Well, just be nice. Well, just being nice will not get you up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work. True. It won't. You need a big, strong why. Now, my why was given to me because I was backed myself into a corner at age 57. I had 10 years retire. I had to do something because I was going to face never retiring. So that was my why. And if I didn't get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, then I wasn't going to get my yacht. or I wasn't going to be a millionaire. And that was the thing. If you haven't got a big enough why, and when you have got a big enough why, you're willing to do anything, be it cab driver, be it delivering pizza, whatever, it doesn't matter, because it's your plan and it's your why and it's your goal.
Yeah. And this is the thing, there's so much things like, I don't see, there's nothing wrong with delivery driver. I don't look down on anybody that delivers to me. I don't look down like, oh my God. I don't even have, to be honest with you, normally you don't have time to process it. You're like, oh, you've delivered the service, thank you, you've delivered what I want, and that's it. You don't like, oh my God, because at the end of the day, right, they've done something of value for you. They've delivered something that you've required. So how can I look down on that? That doesn't make any
I think
kind
I
of
probably
sense.
look down on them.
Do you?
I did at the time.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Before you went into cab driving? Okay, before you went. Okay,
same as cabin,
Okay, fair
so that's the best you can do, drive a cab, yeah?
Oh, gosh.
That's it.
But then you got into it and your mindset changed, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Don't look down on anybody.
Yeah, no, because we don't know what their goals are. Like this person, this could be their third job.
That attitude kept me poor for 57 years. Looking for the big job, looking for the big payoff, chasing, the what we call Bonnie marbles, where I come from, but chasing the butterflies and looking for that big payoff. You don't need a big payoff. It's all about time and incremental additions to the investment, and that's what does it.
Yeah,
that's the secret.
That's so important. That is so important. Thanks for sharing that, because I think it just really, I think people hopefully can get out their own head and do what it takes to get to where you need to get to. Like you say, extra 4 hours. It doesn't have to be delivery driving. It could be anything, whatever skill you've got. If you're a designer, you can sell your skills on
overtime.
Fiverr,
If you work on a minimum wage job, there's probably your hourly paid, so which means there's probably overtime somewhere. You're better off doing overtime in the place where you work, because you're probably good at that job. You'll have done it for a while.
Yeah.
Rather than throw yourself into a side hustle, which you're doing for the first time, so you're not going to be that good at it. And then you've got to market it and social media, let people know what you're doing. The easiest way is to do that. I used to say to people, I says, look, work 4 hours extra a day, Monday to Friday. You'll get a 50% rise. You'll get 8 hours sleep and every weekend off. What's hard about that?
Some people will say it's hard.
It's hard, yeah.
Some people say no. Everybody has your capacity for hard work.
And I know this is really difficult if you've got kids.
Yeah.
I left it too late. My kids are grown. My kids are in their 30s now. So I didn't have that to worry about. There are two great opportunities to become wealthy. The first time is when you don't have kids yet. Because, and I would advocate you stay with your parents till you're 30. I know it's hard because parents are a pain in the arse. But if you stay with your parents till you're 30, again, work 80 hours a week if you can, bank one of the jobs, and you could retire by the time you're 30. If I'd have been doing what I did now at age 20, living with my parents till 30, I'd have been a millionaire at 30 and retired at 30. But you can do that anytime. But when you've got kids, and then after when your kids are left home, great. They're push them out the door. They can look after themselves. Then they're not the parasites to work for. That 18 years, but that chunk in the middle, that 18 years in the middle when you got kids, is hard. So I'm not making it sound easy. That's a hard time for anybody to do it.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. And in terms of saving as well, right? Is budgeting something you do? I don't like calling it budgeting. Like, let's call it financial planning. Planning is, financial planning something that you kind of actively do yourself? Is it something that you're big on as well?
Unusually, because everybody says it's the big part of it. I don't budget because I don't spend money.
Okay.
So everything just gets pushed back into investing.
So you just everything
just gets pushed back.
Wow, you're
I've got a 10-year window.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to 11. I've got to retire. My old age pension comes in 4 years' time at age 67, and I don't want to work till I'm 68 or 69 or 70. If I'm to do this, I've got to make the sacrifice now. It's discipline. Discipline, I think, is I define discipline as doing something now that is of no benefit to you now, but will be a massive benefit to your future self. And when that future self comes along, I think they'll look back at old Perry and say, thanks for doing that, mate. Thanks for putting those hours in, because I can feel the benefit now. But that's discipline to me, is doing something that is no benefit to you now, but will benefit you in the future. So whilst there's you say it's hardcore. But I'm doing it for me. I'm just being selfish. Not for me now. It's hard work now. It's 8 hours a week. And I'm not spending any money. But future Perry in 4 years' time is going to love me for it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that's a good way to think about discipline, right? You are doing it for yourself, but you're doing it for your future self, who is you still, right? You got to just forego like having maybe some fun little bit, right? Yeah, a little bit of sacrifice. I'm really looking forward to seeing your yacht, you know, in a few years time.
I don't want the yacht anymore.
You don't want the yacht anymore?
Well, the yacht.
No way.
When I had no money or nothing invested, the yacht was a symbol of wealth.
Okay. Right,
but I no longer have that. You know, that was the old me. You know, I said I'd change on the journey. I don't want that anymore. And they're bloody expensive things to keep in the water because they're in a really caustic environment, water, and it rots everything. And you've got to get out of the water once a year, and they're expensive to berth. So I've decided when I do want to go on a yacht, I'm just going to hire one for a couple of weeks and let somebody else
so rent it for a little
Airbnb
bit.
For yachts. That's what I'm going to do. Just borrow a yacht for 2 weeks.
Fair enough. I like that. Okay, so then what is the overall goal now? That it's no longer a yacht and it's no longer 300k, which you told me offline is no longer 300k. What's the new goal now?
So I changed the goal. And when I bought the 3 houses, I'd realized that I'd underestimated the potential you can make. Yeah. And I think that's perfectly natural. You know, at that stage, I said I was on minimum wage still am, and had £10,000 of credit card debt and not a nut. I mean, I had no money in the bank, not a nut after 57 years. And so the most I could ever imagine owning was £300,000. Never had a nut in my bank. So £300,000 to me was almost an unassailable mountain to climb, but that was my original goal. And then I bought 3 houses and I thought, hey, I've underestimated this. I think I can get to $1 million. So I changed my goal after the 3rd year. And you'll notice it on my videos if you watch them in date order, that I then moved the goal to making $1 million in 10 years whilst earning only minimum wage. So should the portfolio I'm buying go through, that will take the worth of the properties up to about 780,000. Is that right, Perry? No, more than that. 980,000, so close to $1 million.
Okay.
And then if I buy another 50, and let's call them 100, there's another 50. There's another chunk of money. That's another 5 million. Is that the maths right?
So you buy another 50 properties,
that will
be another 5. So it'd be your portfolio would just be under 6 mil.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let's do the numbers. I mean, they're just airy-fairy numbers because we're trying to predict the future here. But let's say you got 6 mil of property. The rent on those will be about £9,000 a month.
Okay.
I think the mortgage will be half that. But the good thing
4 or 5 profit.
Yeah.
Okay. Per month, yeah.
Per month, yeah.
Okay.
That's including maintenance and management fees. And then but the good thing, as I said, if you've got £5 million of the property and it goes up by 5% a year, there's $250,000 a year you're making in terms of growth in the property.
Okay.
At 5% a year, which you got to think about, right?
Okay.
So my plan is and I do that over the next 2 years, is to hold those from the age of 67 to hold them to the age of 77. So there's 10 years of 5% growth. So who knows what it'll be. But at 77, I should have ticked on my bucket list, you know, like flying in a Spitfire or flying in a hot air balloon over the pyramids, or swimming with great white sharks. All that'll be out my system by the time I'm 77. And then what I'm going to do the plan is to gradually sell it, dispose of it, and give probably most of the money, because at 77 I won't be doing much myself, and I'm going on some nice holidays with the wife, but give them most of it to the kids. Okay. And let them enjoy it. Okay. And I want to do that whilst I'm still alive, so that I can see their faces and I can see them enjoying it and my grandkids enjoying it, because that's ultimately what you're doing it for, isn't it? Because I'm responsible to them.
Yeah. Wow.
Let them down so far, so I need to make amends.
I'm sure you haven't let
feel
them
that
down,
way. I genuinely feel that way, yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't feel that way, honestly. I wouldn't. I mean, look, you haven't. Like I say, I think there's several ways to, you know, provide value to your family. If they're alive, they're well fed, they got roof over their head. Hey, you've done enough. Look. Of course, every parent, I feel, I'm not a parent, so, but I can understand parents, especially I've realized actually, and maybe other, watchers and listeners could maybe relate to this. I feel like I realized that, not just, my parents, it's just a general observation. When your parents get older, you kind of realize that they do think more about that legacy, planning a little bit more. Oh, I want to leave you something, and, I want to do more. That does start to kick in a little bit. But look, I'm sure you've done very well. Look, there, you told us a story of your daughter being in the house. Look, you provided that for her. So I think that's enough. They're well, they're fed, they're educated, they're able to go out on their own. I think that's great. Anything extra is a bonus in my opinion. So one thing I was going to say to you actually that I like that you said, right, which was a cool strategy. It's not that you're just going to live off the income that you make off that property portfolio, right, that 6 million property portfolio, but you have a plan to sell some of it so it can still fund your life, which is very interesting, because I think that's an interesting thing for people to also understand. You don't just live on the dividends of your assets. It's up to you. You can obviously decide how you want to do it.
There's lots of ways to cut it, isn't it? That's the great thing. I don't have to make those decisions now. What I have to do is build the wealth up, and then we worry about what we do with it when we get it.
Yeah. It's so cool. I'm really excited. I definitely want to see the yacht pictures. I definitely want to see the yacht pictures. We obviously know through your journey that you started to raise money, or you're about to complete on a property. For people that want to kind of do that at the point, maybe it's not their first property, but maybe they get comfortable after a while and they're looking to potentially start raising money. How can they kind of get into that? And what are some of the challenges they could face by doing that?
Sure. Well, you're not going to do it straight away. If I'm often asked, knowing what you do now, would you do things differently? And no, I wouldn't. It would be nice if somebody was to have so much faith in me that they wanted to give me some money, but I was working behind a bar minimum wage. Who would give me £1 million? It's just not going to happen. So you have to do some things before you're able to borrow money. Unless that is, of course, unless you have a relative or some really, really good friend who has the money and they really, really trust you. But you're going to have to bring some evidence to the table that you know what you're doing before somebody's going to give you £1 million. So you have to have been on a bit of a journey yourself before you get there. You have to show people that when you say you're going to do something, you do it. You have to show up. You've got to put yourself out there and say, "And this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to and then do it." So you need to have some evidence there that you're going to do that. That the money they're going to give you is safe because you've done these things in the past and you know how to do them. So now their money is relatively safe with you. They're willing to take a bit of risk on it in return for your 10%. Whatever you're going to offer them. So you have to do that first. So you're not going to go straight away and say, "Can I have some money?" Because who's going to lend you some money? Who would have lent me money when I first started? Nobody would have done, and for good reason too. So there's the hard bit. You've got to get in this game first of all and put yourself around. Then you've got to do all you've got to get yourself known. So you need to go on Facebook groups and contribute to that if it's property you want to go into, and then you want to go to property meetings. There are guys who will have a lot of cash, who are in property themselves, but who have a lot of cash, a lot of income, and would consider lending you it as a safer route than getting involved in property themselves. I've got guys, I know there's guys on my subscription site who've got over 100 properties. And they got there not because that was their goal, just because money kept coming in and they wanted something to do with it. Mm-hmm. But there's a time when you say, I've got enough property. I don't want to buy 101st property. And much better, much easier for them just to give you the money.
Yeah.
If they believe you know what you're doing, and you give them 10% a year on it, which is about what the rates are, 10% a year. But you've got to do all that first. It's not. So there's the hard bit, if you will. You say, how can I get this money? Well, you're not going to get it if you've got no track record. You've got to do all the hard stuff first, and there's no escaping that. It's with as life. Nothing comes easy. You've got to put the work in first.
Yeah.
And then once people see what you're doing and know you show up and know you'd say what you're going to do, then they will consider lending money to you. But that's not going to happen in the short term.
You have to have some skin in the game,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Which I agree with. I think it makes sense, right? That you should have some skin in the game. Okay, maybe you didn't buy your own property, but were you part of somebody else's deal? Were you part of a team somewhere to show that you have some kind of credibility, that you kind of know what you're doing? Because you're right. How can you just raise money and you've got no kind of expertise?
No.
I mean, personally, that would be a bad bet. If I had the money to go and give somebody to invest in property, and they came to me like, "Oh, I have no experience in this. This is my first time," I'd be like, "Well, that is very risky. Why would I
exactly
give
right,
you my money? You've got no track record." So yeah, I think that's very important. But like we're saying, it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily buy, but maybe you are part of a team, right? Like
collaboration's great.
Exactly.
I think it's a great way to do it. Like me and my friend, we bought a house. Although I didn't put any money into it. There's an example. If I say you need £30,000 to buy £80,000 house. Well, if there's two of you doing it, you only need £15,000 each now. So it's a great way to do it. And he might have skills, or she might have skills that you don't have. They might be good at decorating or bricklaying or whatever. None of the skills I have. I said right at the beginning, we've got no skills whatsoever. And collaboration is the best way. Like my properties, I don't manage any of them because I'm not good at managing. You got to know what you're good at, and I'm crap at that stuff. And the gas safety certificates, electrical certificates, visiting the property every 6 months. It's just so much work involved. Better to pay somebody 10% of the rent. Let them do it. I have a YouTube channel. I can't do all this technological stuff, so I have a collaborator. I have Will, who's my techie guy. He does all that, so we split it on there. So if you can find ways of working with people who can collaborate with and complement the skills you have and bring to the table skills you don't have, then that's a great way to get involved in property.
Yeah, amazing.
Or anything for that matter, just life in general.
Exactly. So, we mentioned buy to let, right? And this is kind of one of my final questions, right? So buy to let, you're involved in it, and people are skeptical about it, right? People are skeptical.
And it should be. Because there's a big chunk of money you're going to put in. You've had to imagine how hard you've had to work. If you're on minimum wage, how many hours you had to work to generate 30 grand?
Yeah,
a lot of hours.
You
have to do your research. But this, what the great thing is, Addo, is that if you're buying a house, millions of people have bought houses before. So there's expertise and knowledge out there. You don't have to do all this by yourself. Go to a property club, a meeting. There are lots of property clubs in London, I know. Just pay your £10, £15 and rock up at the meeting. You'll have to introduce yourself, and I'm just starting on the journey, guys, and looking for any advice from anywhere. And people will come in and help you.
Yeah.
If you have a goal, whatever your goal is in life, unless you're inventing something, sending rockets to Mars or something, then somebody's already done this. Just go and find these people and ask them how they did it. And that will give you the confidence, and they'll say, yeah, it's easy to do. Yes, there's headaches. There's bound to be headaches, as in anything in life, trials, tribulations.
Yeah.
But if you mitigate your potential losses and do this and do that, somebody who's, as I said, done it before you, and that reduces all the risks. There's always a risk, but talk to people who've already done it.
Yeah. Do you still think buy to let is viable as well in 2025? Because you're still involved in that.
Yeah, well, I can only speak
for yourself.
I'm not prescient. I can't see the future, so
Yeah.
it works for me, and it's continuing to work for me. Will interest rates go up? I think they probably will again.
You think so?
I think they'll come down.
Gosh.
They've come down once. I think I think inflation will come back. I might be pessimistic, in which case the government's only tool apparently is to increase interest rates. So I think that will happen. So on my last, I remortgaged the property 2 months ago rather, and I've locked it into a 5-year fixed. I've got a remortgage coming up in March. I'm going to lock that into a 5-year fixed. And when I buy these 10 properties, they're all going on a 5-year fixed.
Okay. To lock in.
Interest rate would be a little higher than what I would like, but I'll know for 5 years.
That's the profit you're getting. So you have an understanding, okay, I'm good with what this is. Exactly. Yeah. And then at the end of it, you obviously remortgage or potentially sell if it's appreciated in value enough. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. Cool. Thank you so much, Perry. This has been a great conversation. I want to talk a little bit about your book. So this is Perry's book, Minimum Wage Millionaire. So I'm also showcasing on the camera. I realized that I should say for my listeners what I'm actually showing on the camera because they're not all watching. So what can people expect from the book, and who is it for?
It's for anybody it's a book of hope, I call it. It's for anybody who thinks they're too old, who they don't make enough money, they're not clever enough to do this stuff, because I explain in the book how anyone able to work can become wealthy. I think it's quite a unique book. I designed it to be a unique book in that it tells you step by step how to become wealthy. If you consider some of the greatest books written on personal finance, and I'm talking things like Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, none of them ever tell you what to do. They're all it's all subjective stuff. It's all theory. My book is designed for somebody who doesn't have a goal and doesn't have a plan to achieve the goal. And it will lead you through the process. I'll tell you what the goal is to be. It's to be wealthy in 10 years. I'll tell you the plan, whether you choose to do it the long, easy way, the short, hard way. There's a workbook at the back. I tell you, go into detail how exactly I did it, if anybody wants to copy that. But it's a very, very practical book that will give you a goal and a plan and will guide you to becoming wealthy.
Okay. I love that. We love practical. That's why on the podcast, we like to have these conversations, because we're trying to help people understand that this stuff is actually achievable, right? So you've got to take the action. But for some people, they don't know the steps. So I think that's going to definitely really help people in terms of their steps. Thank you so much, Perry. I think it's been great speaking to you. I am looking forward to seeing, your journey. And you think that you're going to achieve your journey a little bit quicker than 10 years.
I think I'm going to do it in 8 years.
In 8, which is great. But obviously, we don't know the financial future. So that's another message for people, right? This could be...
So you've got to watch the YouTube channel to make either I fall flat on my arse or I make myself $1 million.
Well, we hope not. I think you're doing all the steps that you can do to get there, right? You're almost completing on this one. And then really it's one more deal for you that you're looking for. So this deal was about to complete, and then you've got one more deal. So it's not like you're far away to be able to doing that. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that comes. And just thanks so much for sharing all the stories, being vulnerable and just like sharing like those important messages. Because I think it's very important for people to also understand like that this stuff, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, it's the change. I think that's the most important thing. It's the change you decided to change, right? Yeah. And, for a lot of people, they might think, oh, it's difficult. But for all of us that are doing what we're doing, we had to change. I've had to change. That's the truth. I'm not who I was 1 year or 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. I've had to change. I've had to fight fears. I've had to fight imposter syndromes and I still do, right? In so many kind of situations, fight anxiety and all that sort of stuff. So it's very important. Do you have actually before I say that, where can people find you?
I have a YouTube channel called Stupid is the Norm, and the book is available on Amazon. If you just type in Perry Wilson, it'll come up there. Great.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Perry. And do you have any final words for the watchers and listeners?
I would just an imposter syndrome, because I still struggle a little with imposter syndrome, but the way I deal with it, I hope this helps people, is that you get imposter syndrome because you're comparing yourself to somebody who is further down the line than you, further ahead than you, and you see yourself lacking when compared with them. Instead of doing that, because you can't win that game, because there's always somebody further ahead than you who's been in the game longer, who's amassed more money or been better, whatever it is in life. The way you combat imposter syndrome, the way I deal with it, is that I compare myself to the person I was when I started. And I say, look how far you've come, Perry. £10,000 in credit card debt, no money in the bank, working behind a bar, minimum wage, age 57. Here you are, just about to buy your 14th property. Still on minimum wage, but still working lots of hours. But look how far you've come. And that's the way you deal with imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Amazing. I love that message. And that's a very good way to do it, because if you compare yourself to your past self and you've progressed, you will feel better about that. Amazing. Thank you so much, Perry. Really appreciate you.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Ado. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the podcast, and we'll see you next week's episode. If you like this episode, leave a review, tap, like, or subscribe to the channel. Your support is appreciated. We'll keep working hard to bring you more valuable episodes.